We all have the dream of our bill sailing through the legislature and passing without amendments. I mean, that is the American dream of every advocate, right? But reality is more like a game show. Changes happen, amendments are made, and you're wondering if you should hold on to your bill or trade it in for that unknown thing behind door number two. When your bill starts getting amended, that is when you start negotiating. On today's Better Advocacy in 10 Minutes or Less, we're focusing on how to negotiate during the legislative session. The four keys to negotiating during session are: number one, know who you need to have on board. Number two, know and stick to your bottom lines. Number three, don't be afraid to walk. And number four, don't burn bridges. See, that's 2 plus 2 equals 4. All right. Now, making changes through negotiation are only beneficial if you have all the key people on board. Of course, you'll need legislators. They're the ones actually voting on your legislation. But you also need advocates in the impacted community on board too. Now, advocates are the ones contacting legislators and showing up at the State House, making those meetings, having those conversations. You need to make sure they are all on the same page and using the same messaging as you, as these negotiations happen, as these changes happen. And just as important as the advocates are the impacted individuals. Now, some of these may be advocates too, but when I'm talking about solely impacted individuals, what I'm talking about are those people that aren't able to come to your state house and really advocate for the bill, but they are directly impacted by it. Now, there are a host of reasons why they might not be advocates. Work doesn't allow it, they don't have the time or resources to devote to it, or simply they're not comfortable with it. But don't use their lack of ability to advocate as a reason to disregard their thoughts, feelings, and ideas. You want and need the impacted community on board with any changes that are made during the negotiations. Now, the more passionate people are about a policy, the harder it is for them to negotiate. When emotions run high during a session, you want to make sure you are prepared beforehand to keep tensions and the chance for disagreements to play out publicly and hurt your cause to a minimum. This is why knowing and sticking to your bottom lines is so important. This is your fallback position. Now, we all want our perfect bill, but if that's not possible, will we take the good or even a meh just to get something on the books? Or is it better to hold out for an all or nothing stance? I can't answer that question, but you need to make sure you and your legislator, advocates, and impacted community have answered that question before things get heated. I usually try to have an aspirational part of my bill. Something that I don't think stands a good chance of passing, but I want to put it in there because it is the ideal. And I prepare everybody for that ahead of time. That becomes our bargaining chip. Now, if you have that from the start, great. If not, you should have a meeting. Make a decision. Put it in writing. Have everyone agree to what's in writing. If there is someone in the minority and they can't agree to what the coalition has decided, that's fine. But work with them to make sure that they won't publicly cause any problems. If negotiations are needed, use that agreement as your guide and stick to it. The only time you should deviate from it is if new information becomes available and your coalition is able to meet and make a decision. Otherwise, stick to your original plan. Does it sound rigid? Maybe. But you have a way to change plans by getting your coalition buy-in on new information. And the trust built within your coalition by sticking to your word will help you create and sustain a durable, lasting coalition. Now, what happens if you stick to your bottom lines and don't budge any further than your fallback position, and you realize even that won't pass this year? Don't be afraid to walk. Tell your legislator that what's being proposed isn't acceptable, and you and your allies will fight against it. Well, every legislator wants to pass legislation. The last thing any legislator wants to do is piss off his constituents or allies. If you tell the legislator to kill your bill, don't make any changes to it and let it die, or anything like this, the legislator will likely follow your wishes, especially if you've treated that legislator, your patron, with respect and they understand why the proposed changes are not feasible for you. Remember, no bill is better than a bad law. Finally, and most importantly, Don't burn bridges. Negotiations can be stressful, especially if politics isn't your 9 to 5. If this bill that you're trying to make a law, if this passion that you're trying to turn into policy is something that you really are passionate about, and you know the real world impact that it will have on the lives of people you care about, it can be hard not to have strong feelings towards people that are opposing your bill or want to change it in ways that you don't think are acceptable. But in politics, your enemy in the morning can be your ally in the afternoon if you allow that to happen. Lobbyists know this trick. They'll fight passionately against the legislator's bill in the morning, and then in the afternoon be standing by that same legislator's side to fight for another bill. This is the nature of politics. True, it's harder as an advocate because you're not just a hired gun, you are also probably emotionally connected to the issue. But if you can step back and see the bigger picture and see how you are developing long-term relationships by the way that you treat legislators, then the pain of those negotiations that didn't turn out well for you can be easier to handle. All right, there you have my 4 tips for negotiating during session. Have all the key people on board. Know and stick to your bottom lines. Don't be afraid to walk. Don't burn bridges. Once again, that's 2 and 2, which equals 4. You know what? And while we're on this topic on how to get things done during session, on next week's
Better Advocacy in 10 minutes or less,
we're going to discuss everything you need to know about meetings with legislators during session and how to get those meetings.